Known as waste pickers, reclaimers, cartoneros, catadores, pemulung, or tokai, informal workers are the backbone of most waste management systems in developing countries. They collect recyclable materials from households, landfills, garbage trucks, and on the street. They work in sorting and in intermediary trading. An estimated 1% of the urban population in low and middle income countries, around 15 million people, work informally in waste management. Informality is present throughout the whole waste value chain in most developing countries. The capacities and income of informal workers may vary greatly. Professional and semi-professional informal businesses may work as intermediary traders or operate sorting and recycling facilities. They often possess specialist knowledge and expertise, vehicles, and networks, but do not formalize due to administrative barriers or compliance costs. Material collectors who work with households and businesses often possess established connections with waste producers. In some cases, they are organized in cooperatives, which guarantee bargaining power and more stable incomes. Other material pickers may work on the streets or dump sites without further support, either permanently or seasonally when no other work is available. Informal waste workers include particularly vulnerable groups that face additional challenges. Children often pick waste to supplement household incomes but lose out on their social and educational development. Women are overrepresented among waste pickers as they often face systemic barriers to other employment opportunities. For example, through the additional burden of household duties and childcare besides their informal work. The flexible working hours of waste picking may be a benefit for them, but they also face particular struggles through violence and harassment on the streets. The bulk of global plastics recycling relies on informal collection, totaling 60% of all plastics recycled. Nevertheless, only 27% of all plastics are collected for recycling, leaving plenty of space for improvement. Despite their current importance for waste management, informal economies and waste pickers in particular are often seen as a sign of underdevelopment and a hindrance to functioning waste management systems. Indeed, a major shift towards service-oriented and supervised work is necessary to enable the establishment of nationwide collection and recycling systems which cover all packaging materials. Informal workers usually operate under free market conditions. They are dependent on the sale of materials with a net positive value. Many materials aren't profitable under these conditions and are therefore not collected. As waste pickers siphon off valuable materials, revenues from these materials are lost for formal waste management systems, increasing the cost for municipalities and citizens. To enable comprehensive recovery and recycling of all materials, regardless of their market value, informal workers must therefore gain access to stable funding as service providers. Formal operators also face similar challenges in the absence of an EPR scheme. As informal economies are largely unregulated, they often operate under conditions which are harmful to workers and the environment. The scattering of waste on the streets through waste pickers or the leakage of plastics and wastewater in recycling stations are common issues. Simultaneously, informal workers often work under precarious conditions without protective equipment, social securities, or labor rights. They are further exposed to violence on the streets and even police harassment. An expansion of government oversight can therefore be of mutual interest. Lacking legal recognition and initial poverty makes it extremely difficult for many informal operators to increase their productivity as they don't have the capital or security to invest in vehicles, infrastructure, or education. To increase in size and productivity, informal enterprises must therefore gain access to opportunities for business and capacity development, as well as bargaining mechanisms. The task at hand lies in transforming the work of informal and unregulated businesses and workers into universal provision of waste management services in supervised and regulated framework. This requires both formal recognition and supervision of work, as well as the provision of resources needed to increase productivity and improve livelihoods. EPR schemes can support this transformation. For economic and social reasons, it must be achieved with informal actors and not against them. Let's begin with the economic side of the argument. In the last module, we highlighted the importance of local knowledge in implementing effective EPR schemes. They should include pre-existing waste management capacities, which are mostly provided by informal workers, in order to grow steadily while utilizing locally available resources. Thus, they also minimize the risk of creating white elephants, large infrastructure projects which fail as they are not integrated into the overall environment. The risk of neglecting established collection systems is further highlighted by the following example from Bogota, Colombia. In 2019, the introduction of drop-off waste containers for household waste became a disaster. As waste pickers who have intimate knowledge of waste production weren't consulted, drop-off points were badly placed, some hardly used, and others overflowing. Especially in capital-scarce environments, systems must be designed to take advantage of any available skilled labor. In waste management, this is often concentrated in the informal sector. Upgrading informal labor through formal recognition and financial support can be the most effective way to build a productive waste management system. Back to Bogota. In 2012, an ambitious zero-waste program was introduced, which included the formal recognition, organizational support, and payment of waste pickers. It quickly reduced the amounts of landfilled waste and cut municipal waste management costs by 37%. This is in stark contrast to the waste management policies introduced by Bogota's subsequent governments. Rather than continuing the successful inclusion of informal workers, they cut support for the informal sector and excluded them from consultations. This sent the amounts of landfilled waste skyrocketing. There is also a strong social side to the argument. As informal waste workers often work under the most precarious conditions, their inclusion in EPR schemes can provide livelihoods and contribute directly to pro-poor development. Legal recognition can stabilize their incomes and protect informal workers, oftentimes women, from harassment, ensure health and safety and social protection. In contrast, the displacement of informal economies in waste management can lead to already marginalized communities losing the few opportunities they have for generating an income. So what should inclusion look like? Waste management policies should attempt to create labor-intensive systems which take advantage of the relative abundance of labor in relation to capital. Additionally, this creates incomes through employment. Many technologies are easy and quick to establish and provide reliable waste management services. They usually rely on experienced and skilled labor, which is readily available in the informal sector in particular. For example, manual sorting centers supported through simple technical equipment can be set up in a decentralized fashion without large investments. In contrast, highly automated systems require large capital investments and a small specialized workforce. Both are often unavailable. Door-to-door collection services with small vehicles may be more cost-effective and provide more jobs than centralized bring-in systems, which rely on large trucks, which can often not even access certain areas. Furthermore, attention must be paid to increasing productivity and improving working conditions. Measures which benefit informal workers in many cases also dramatically increase their productivity, leading to more effective waste management systems. These include the provision of credit, education, secure contracts, and equipment such as protective gear and vehicles. Formal recognition and regulation often places a burden on waste workers. They may lose access to waste streams, be subjected to taxes and rigid work regimes, as well as having to comply with environmental standards. Although unavoidable, these costs must be offset through benefits provided to these workers. These can include payments to waste pickers and recyclers through the EPR scheme or access to social protection and collective bargaining mechanisms. If formalization costs are not offset, workers are likely to avoid regulations or lose their livelihoods. Provisions should take specific vulnerabilities into account, including in children, female, and elderly workers. For example, the provision of childcare has been shown to be effective in reducing child labor and improving women's working conditions, as female workers are freed from this additional duty. A mere ban on child labor would not solve the economic pressures responsible for it in the first place. Work in sorting centers can also prove particularly beneficial to elderly workers, as the labor is less strenuous and can place female workers in a safer working environment. Finally, working with waste often comes with strong stigma. This stigma increases harassment and marginalization. Legal recognition and official contracting can often be simple steps to raise informal waste worker status. For example, this can include handing out uniforms or ID cards. More proactive forms of raising informal workers' recognition include the support of their associations to enable them to raise their voice. Additionally, campaigns can rebrand waste pickers as environmental workers. One beautiful example of such campaigns is Pimp My Carroza, started by the graffiti artist Mondano in Sao Paulo. It's easy to see how such painted vehicles help to transform the public image of waste pickers. Now, only the practical question remains. How can informal workers be included in the EPR scheme? Participation of informal workers should be guaranteed throughout the creation of the EPR scheme. Assessments of waste management systems and possible EPR schemes should include the role of informal workers from the outset. This is the basis for fair inclusion of informal workers. Their active participation in policy formulation remains the most reliable guarantee for understanding their needs. As informal actors are often marginalized, their inclusion may require active efforts to support their organizations and give them a voice in negotiations. The inclusion of informal workers should be clearly mandated in the EPR's legal framework. This holds all actors accountable to providing support to informal actors. For example, Chile's EPR law mandates that registered waste pickers must have access to the bidding process for waste management contracts. It further states that the PRO is responsible for training, financing, and formalizing waste pickers with a view towards their full integration. Inclusion of informal workers in formal waste management systems occurs between two poles. Some EPR schemes have integrated formally informal workers as employees, especially in collection and sorting. They are then formally contracted by a waste management service provider. This can provide workers with regular incomes, job security, improved working conditions, and access to on-the-job training. In other models, informal workers are integrated into EPR schemes as business partners, contracted to fulfill different waste management tasks. In practice, the integration of informal workers creates a trade-off between the need to regulate waste management services and the autonomy of waste pickers. For businesses and associations, it poses a trade-off between the benefits and costs of operating in a reliable but regulated system. Any inclusion of informal actors is built on trust. It will only be achieved through recognition, participation, and arrangements of mutual benefit. I hope you enjoyed this module. The expert voices will help you dive deeper into the topic, and see you in the next video.